A crumpled ball of paper hit her in the face. She didn't flinch. She set her attendance sheet down on the desk and looked at the boy who threw it. He was leaning back in his chair, grinning, arms crossed. The whole class laughed. Another kid kicked his feet up on the desk. A girl in the back row popped her gum loud enough to echo. The new teacher stood perfectly still. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't call for help. She just stood there. Now here's the thing. The kids in that room had run off 3 teachers in 6 months. They thought she was number 4. But this woman was Joan Lin, the wife of Jackie Chan. And the kids who humiliated her had no idea what was coming. What happened over the next few weeks changed every one of them. Stay with me on this one. Now let me tell you who Joan Lin actually is. Because the kids in that classroom had no clue. None. Joan Lin wasn't some substitute pulled off a list. She was a retired actress. Taiwanese cinema. She'd been in over 30 films. Action films. Drama. Romance. She'd worked with some of the most respected directors in Asia. And in 1982, she married Jackie Chan. You know the name. Everybody knows the name. One of the biggest action stars in the history of film. A man who did his own stunts, broke every bone worth breaking, and became a global icon. But Joan wasn't famous because of Jackie. She was famous before him. She gave it all up when they got married. Walked away from the spotlight because she wanted something quieter. Something real. For decades, she raised their son. She managed the household while Jackie traveled the world making movies. And when the nest was empty and the years had passed, Joan made a decision that surprised everyone who knew her. She wanted to teach. Not at a private school. Not at some elite academy where parents donated buildings. She wanted to teach at a school that needed help. And believe me, Franklin Heights High School needed help. Franklin Heights sat on the edge of a district that politicians only visited during election season. The building was old. The hallways smelled like bleach and bad plumbing. Half the ceiling tiles in the science wing were missing. The football field hadn't been mowed in 3 weeks. But the real problem wasn't the building. The real problem was what happened inside it. In the last 2 years, Franklin Heights had lost 11 teachers. 11. Some quit after a week. One lasted 3 days. The students didn't just misbehave. They waged campaigns. They found your weakness and they hammered it. They filmed everything on their phones. They posted it online. And the administration couldn't do much about it because the district was already threatening to shut the school down. Suspending half the student body wasn't an option when enrollment numbers were the only thing keeping the doors open. Principal Diane Harris was a tired woman. Not lazy. Tired. There's a difference. She'd been fighting for that school for 9 years. Fighting the district. Fighting the budget. Fighting parents who didn't show up. When Joan Lin walked into her office and said she wanted the open position teaching English literature, Harris almost laughed. She looked at Joan's resume. Former actress. No formal teaching degree, but she'd completed a certification program. She was polite, soft-spoken, well-dressed. Harris thought she wouldn't last a day. But they were out of options. The position had been posted for 4 months with 0 applicants. So Harris handed Joan a classroom key and a stack of outdated textbooks and said, "Good luck." Joan's first day was the day you already saw. Paper in the face. Laughter. A room full of teenagers who smelled blood before she even opened her mouth. Now here's who you need to know about. Marcus Cole. 17. Junior. 6'2". Built like he played football, which he did until he got kicked off the team for fighting. Marcus ran that classroom the way a warden runs a cell block. When he talked, the other kids listened. When he laughed at a teacher, the whole room laughed. And when he decided a teacher was done, that teacher was done. Marcus had a discipline file thicker than most textbooks. Fights. Vandalism. Verbal abuse toward staff. 3 suspensions in 1 semester. His crew included Deshawn, who never spoke but followed Marcus everywhere, and Brittany, a girl with a sharp tongue who could reduce a grown adult to silence with 1 sentence. That first week, they tested Joan every single day. Monday, Marcus talked over her the entire period. Tuesday, Brittany asked her if she'd bought her outfit at a thrift store. Wednesday, Deshaun played music from his phone at full volume and stared at Joan the whole time, daring her to say something. Joan never yelled. Not once. She didn't send anyone to the office. She didn't write referrals. She didn't threaten. She just kept teaching. She'd wait for the noise to die down, and then she'd continue her sentence exactly where she left off, like nothing happened. The kids didn't know what to make of it. Most teachers either screamed or cried. Joan did neither, and that confused them. But confusion doesn't last long with teenagers. When they can't get a reaction, they don't give up. They escalate, and that's exactly what Marcus was planning to do. By the end of that first week, Joan Lynn had survived longer than the last 3 teachers combined. But surviving and winning are 2 very different things. And the kids at Franklin Heights hadn't even started trying yet. The second week started with a message. Joan walked into her classroom Monday morning and stopped in the doorway. Someone had written on the whiteboard in thick red marker. 2 words. Quit now. Joan set her bag down. She picked up the eraser. She wiped the board clean. Then she wrote the day's assignment like nothing had happened. The students filed in. Marcus sat in the back watching. He didn't say anything that day. He didn't have to. The message had been delivered. Tuesday was worse. Joan came out to the parking lot after school and found the side mirror of her car hanging by a wire. Smashed. Glass on the asphalt. A long scratch ran from the front wheel well to the rear bumper. Deep enough that you could feel it with your fingertip. She stood there looking at it for a long time. Then she got in the car and drove home. She didn't report it. She didn't mention it the next day. And that's the part that made Marcus nervous. Not scared. Nervous. Because people who don't react are harder to control than people who do. A teacher who yells, you know how to play that. A teacher who cries, even easier. But a teacher who looks at a smashed mirror and just drives home? That's someone operating on a level you don't understand yet. Wednesday, things shifted. Joan was mid-sentence, talking about a passage from a novel, when Marcus interrupted her. Loud. Yo, why are you still here? The room went quiet. Joan looked at him. She didn't answer. Marcus leaned forward. I asked you a question. Why are you still here? Nobody wants you here. Joan closed her book. She looked at Marcus and said, very calmly, because you need me here. For words. That's all she said. Then she opened the book and kept reading. Marcus didn't respond, but his face changed. Something tightened behind his eyes. He wasn't used to someone looking at him like that. Not with fear. Not with authority. With something else. Something steady. Thursday is when it happened. A fight broke out in the hallway right outside Joan's classroom. 2 boys. Not Marcus. 2 younger kids, freshmen, tangled up on the floor. One had the other in a headlock. The bigger one was throwing wild punches at the smaller kid's ribs. Teachers were shouting from down the hall, but nobody was close enough to intervene. Joan was close enough. She walked out of her classroom and into the hallway. The bigger kid had at least 50 pounds on her. She didn't hesitate. She stepped in and put her hand on the bigger boy's shoulder. Not a grab. Placement. Precise. She pressed somewhere near his collarbone with her thumb, and his grip loosened. Then she guided him backward with one smooth motion. He didn't fall. He didn't swing at her. He just moved, like his body decided to cooperate before his brain caught up. The smaller kid scrambled to his feet and ran. The bigger kid stood there, blinking, rubbing his shoulder. Joan pointed at him and said, sit. He sat, right there on the hallway floor, like a dog that just met its owner for the first time. Now, the students who saw that, they talked. Believe me, they talked. By Friday morning, the rumor had spread through the entire school. The new English teacher broke up a fight with one hand. She touched the kid once and he couldn't move. She knew pressure points. She was ex-military. She was a spy. None of that was exactly true. But what was true was this. Joan Lynn had spent years around some of the best martial artists in the world. She trained with Jackie's stunt team. Not to become a fighter, but because when you live that life for decades, you absorb things. You learn where the body is vulnerable. You learn how to control a situation without throwing a punch. And she'd used that knowledge exactly once, in a school hallway, on a Thursday afternoon. Marcus heard the rumors. He didn't like them. Not because he was scared. Because the power in that school was shifting. And power was the only thing Marcus had. He asked Joan to talk after class on Friday. She agreed. He walked up to her desk when the room was empty. He stood over her. He was tall enough to make it feel like a threat without saying a word. And he said, "You think that hallway thing makes you tough?" Joan didn't stand up. She didn't lean back. She looked up at him and said, "I think it makes me someone who cares whether kids in this school get hurt." Marcus stared at her. Then he knocked a stack of papers off her desk with the back of his hand. Pages scattered across the floor. He walked out without another word. Joan picked up every page. She put them back in order. She sat behind her desk for a long time after that. Friday afternoon. The hallways were empty. The building was quiet. Joan sat in her classroom eating lunch alone. A sandwich from home, a bottle of water, and a paperback novel she'd been reading for weeks. Sunlight came through the window and landed on the attendance sheet still sitting on the corner of her desk. The same one from her first day. She took a sip of water, turned a page. The week was over. The car mirror was already replaced. The whiteboard had been clean for days. Nobody had thrown anything at her since Monday. Even Marcus, for all his posturing, had only knocked over some papers. Felt like the worst was behind her. Like the storm had passed and the kids were getting bored of the fight. Maybe they'd move on. Maybe she'd be able to actually teach. She allowed herself a small breath. Not a sigh, just a settling. A moment where her shoulders dropped half an inch. For the first time since she'd arrived at Franklin Heights, Joan Lynn felt something close to calm. She had no idea what Monday was going to look like. Monday morning, Joan walked into her classroom and stopped cold. Every single desk was flipped upside down. Chairs stacked in a pile against the back wall. And on the whiteboard, in the same red marker as before, 2 words. Go home. But this time was different. This time, Marcus was standing in the hallway. Phone out. Recording. He filmed Joan's face the moment she saw the room. He filmed her standing in the doorway, not moving, not speaking. And he uploaded it before first period was over. The caption read, "New teacher at Franklin Heights can't even keep a classroom together." Laughing emojis. A hashtag that doesn't need repeating. Within 2 hours, the video had 4,000 views. By lunch, it had 40,000. By the time Joan drove home that afternoon, the video had been shared across 6 platforms and picked up by 3 local news accounts. Now here's where the story changes. Because up until this moment, this was a school problem. A teacher versus some tough kids. That's a story that plays out every day in every city. But the second that video went public, it stopped being personal. It became something else entirely. The school board saw it. Parents saw it. District officials who'd been looking for a reason to shut down Franklin Heights saw it. Principal Harris got a call from the superintendent's office before the final bell rang. The message was clear. One more incident and they would begin closure proceedings. Not next year. Not next semester. Now, Harris called Joan into her office. She looked like she hadn't slept. She told Joan the truth. "If you quit, I understand. But if you quit, this school is done. They'll use it as the final straw." Joan didn't answer right away. She looked at the framed photos on Harris's wall. Students from previous graduating classes. Kids who made it out. Kids who went to college. Kids who came back and coached Little League. A decade of proof that Franklin Heights could work. Joan said, "I'm not quitting." Harris exhaled. But the relief didn't last. Because the video was still out there. And it was still spreading. That night, something happened that nobody at Franklin Heights saw coming. A commenter on one of the posts recognized Joan. Not as a teacher, as an actress. The comment read, "Wait, that's Joan Lynn. She was in Taiwanese films in the 70s and 80s. She's married to Jackie Chan." The comment got buried at first. Then someone screenshotted it and reposted it. Then a fan account for Jackie Chan confirmed it. Then an entertainment blog ran a short piece with the headline, "Jackie Chan's wife allegedly harassed by students at American high school." By Tuesday morning, the story had jumped from local news to international tabloids. Reporters were parked outside the school. Camera crews. A news van from a station 3 states away. Marcus Cole's video, which was supposed to humiliate a quiet teacher, had just made her the most talked-about educator in the country. And it made Marcus the most hated teenager on the internet. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. Because this story is about to turn in a way nobody expected. Marcus didn't come to school Tuesday. His mother called him in sick. But he wasn't sick. He was sitting in his bedroom watching his phone blow up with notifications. Death threats. Insults. Strangers telling a 17-year-old they hoped he'd suffer. People who didn't know his name 24 hours ago were now calling him every foul word in the language. Deshawn and Brittany came to school, but they kept their heads down. Nobody in the crew was talking. Nobody was laughing. The hallways were quiet in a way they hadn't been all year. Joan taught her classes like it was any other day. She didn't mention the reporters outside. She didn't mention the video. She didn't mention Jackie Chan. She opened her textbook and started the lesson. But something had changed in the room. The kids were looking at her differently. Not with fear. Not even with respect yet. With curiosity. Like they were seeing her for the first time. Like the person standing at the front of the room had just become three-dimensional and they didn't know what to do with that. After school, Joan found Principal Harris in her office again. Harris told her that 2 reporters had requested interviews. A morning show wanted her on camera. Podcast wanted her story. Joan declined every single one. Harris asked her why. Joan said, "Because this isn't about me. And it's not about Jackie. It's about the kids in that building." Harris stared at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Jackie knows, doesn't he?" Joan nodded. "He called last night." "What did he say?" Joan almost smiled. Almost. "He said he wants to meet Marcus." Harris leaned back in her chair. She didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" Joan picked up her bag. "I guess we'll find out." She walked out of the office and down the empty hallway. Her shoes echoed on the tile. The building was quiet again. But this time the quiet felt different. It didn't feel like calm. It felt like the space between a lightning flash and the thunder that follows. Something was coming. Everyone could feel it. And for the first time since Joan arrived at Franklin Heights, the students were not the ones in control. Wednesday morning. A black SUV pulled into the Franklin Heights parking lot at 7:45. No logo. No entourage. No camera crew. Just one vehicle. The driver's door opened and Jackie Chan stepped out. He was wearing a plain gray jacket and dark pants. No sunglasses. No hat. Nothing that said movie star. He looked like somebody's uncle showing up for a parent-teacher conference. He walked through the front doors, nodded at the security guard, and went straight to the main office. Principal Harris met him in the hallway. She started to say something formal, some kind of welcome, but Jackie just shook her hand and said, "Which room is hers?" Harris walked him to Joan's classroom. Second period was about to start. The bell rang. Students filed in. And there, sitting in the last row in a chair that was slightly too small for him, was Jackie Chan. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 26 students stood frozen between the door and their desks, staring at the man in the back row like he was a hologram. Brittany's mouth was open. Deshawn had his phone halfway out of his pocket but didn't dare lift it. A girl near the window whispered something to the boy next to her. The boy didn't respond. He just stared. Joan looked at Jackie. Jackie looked at Joan. Something passed between them. A look that married couples understand. It said, "I'm here. Do your thing." Joan said, "Sit down, everyone." They sat. Every single one of them. No noise. No back talk. No chairs scraping. They sat the way you sit when your brain hasn't caught up with what your eyes are seeing. Joan taught the class. She taught the entire 50-minute period. Shakespeare. She read passages aloud and asked questions and called on students by name. And they answered. Quietly, awkwardly, but they answered. Jackie sat in the back and listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't perform. He just sat there like a student, and twice Joan caught him nodding along like he was actually learning something. When the bell rang, the students didn't rush out. They lingered. A few of them looked at Jackie like they wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Jackie smiled at them. A real smile. The kind that doesn't perform for a camera. One by one, they filtered out. Marcus wasn't in that class. He hadn't come back to school since the video blew up. But Harris had called his mother the night before. And his mother, after a long conversation, had agreed to bring him in. Marcus arrived at noon. He walked into the building with his hood up and his eyes on the floor. His mother walked behind him. She was a small woman with tired hands and a face that carried more weight than her body did. Harris led them to an empty classroom. Jackie was already inside, sitting on the edge of a desk. Marcus stopped in the doorway. His mother nudged him forward. He stepped in. The door closed behind them. Now, I wasn't in that room. Nobody was except the four of them. But here's what came out later, pieced together from what Marcus told a counselor and what his mother shared with Harris. Jackie didn't yell. He didn't lecture. He looked at Marcus and said, "Sit down. I want to tell you something." Marcus sat. Jackie told him about growing up in Hong Kong, about being a terrible student, about getting into fights before he was 10 years old, about his father sending him to the Peking Opera School, where the training was brutal and the discipline was physical and there was nobody coming to save you. He told Marcus about being hit, about wanting to quit every single day, about the anger that lived in his chest like a fist that wouldn't open. He told him about learning to channel that anger, not into hurting people, into work, into movement, into control. He said discipline wasn't about being obedient. It was about deciding who you wanted to become and then showing up for that person every single day, even when nobody was watching. Then Jackie said something that made Marcus look up for the first time. He said, "I see you. I was you. And I'm telling you right now, the path you're on has an ending. I've seen it. I've buried friends who stayed on it." Marcus didn't say anything. His jaw was tight. His eyes were wet. His mother was crying quietly in the corner. Jackie reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. Old, creased. A young boy in a training uniform, maybe 12 years old. Skinny, angry, fists clenched. It was Jackie, decades ago. Before the fame, before the movies, before any of it. Just a scared, furious kid who didn't know what to do with everything he was feeling. Jackie handed the photo to Marcus. "Keep it," he said. "And when you feel like destroying something, look at that kid. He figured it out. You can too." Marcus held the photo with both hands. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "I'm sorry." 2 words. Quiet enough that you'd miss them if you weren't listening. Jackie put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. Not hard, not soft, just steady. He told him about a youth martial arts program he funded. Discipline-based. Not fighting. Structure, respect, self-control. He said there was a spot for Marcus if he wanted it. No cameras. No publicity. Just training. Marcus looked at his mother. She nodded. Marcus looked back at Jackie and said, "Okay, that was it. No dramatic speech. No slow clap. No movie moment. Just a kid in a chair saying okay to a man who once sat in the same kind of chair, carrying the same kind of weight." The weeks that followed were not a movie. There was no montage. No sudden transformation where every kid in the school started raising their hand and saying, "Yes, ma'am." That's not how real life works. But things changed. Slowly. Unevenly. The way things actually change when something real has happened. Marcus came back to school the following Monday. He didn't apologize to Joan in front of the class. He didn't make a speech. He walked in, sat down, and opened his textbook. That was it. And believe me, for Marcus Cole, that was everything. He started the martial arts program the same week. 3 evenings a week at a community center 40 minutes from his house. His mother drove him. Every session. She'd sit in the car and read a magazine and wait. She never complained about the gas or the time. She told Harris later that it was the first time in years she'd seen her son come home tired instead of angry. The other students watched Marcus closely. Teenagers always watch the leader. When the leader shifts, they shift. Not all of them. Not right away. But enough. Deshawn started coming to class on time. Didn't say much. Didn't cause trouble. Just showed up and sat down and stayed quiet. That was his version of change, and Joan accepted it without comment. Brittany was harder. She had a mouth that worked faster than her conscience, and she wasn't ready to give that up. But she stopped aiming it at Joan. She'd still talk back to other teachers. She'd still roll her eyes so hard you could hear it. But when Joan spoke, Brittany listened. Something about what had happened. The video, the reveal, Jackie sitting in the back of the room. It had cracked something open in Brittany that she wasn't ready to name yet. That was fine. Joan wasn't in a hurry. Joan taught. That's what she did. She taught Shakespeare and poetry and essays and grammar. She made them read out loud. She made them write paragraphs by hand, not typed by hand, because she said you think differently when your hand is moving across paper. Some kids groaned. Some kids tried. A few kids quietly started to like it. There were still bad days. A sophomore threw a pencil across the room during fourth period. A group of freshmen got caught vaping in the bathroom for the third time. A fight broke out near the gym, unrelated to Joan's class. Just the ordinary chaos of a school that was still healing. Joan didn't pretend those days didn't happen. She just kept showing up. Every morning. Same time. Same attendance sheet on the corner of her desk. Principal Harris noticed something she hadn't expected. Teacher retention. 2 new hires came on board in November. Neither one quit. One of them told Harris it was because of Joan. If she can handle it, the new teacher said. I've got no excuse. The reporters eventually went away. The story cooled off the way stories do. Jackie didn't come back to the school. He didn't need to. What he'd done in that room with Marcus wasn't for the cameras. It was for a kid. And the kid received it. That was enough. About 6 weeks after the video incident, Joan found an envelope on her desk. No name on the outside. She opened it during lunch, alone in her classroom, the way she always ate. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper, folded twice. The handwriting was messy. Big letters. The kind of writing that comes from a hand more used to gripping a basketball than a pen. It read, Mrs. Lynn, I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to write it. I'm sorry for what I did to you. Not just the video. All of it. The board. Your car. The way I talked to you. You didn't deserve any of that. I don't know why you stayed, but I'm glad you did. Nobody stays. You stayed. Thank you. Marcus. Joan read it twice. Then a third time. She pressed her lips together. She folded the letter and held it in her lap. The sunlight was coming through the window again. The same way it had that Friday afternoon weeks ago when she thought the worst was over. This time she was right. She didn't cry. But her eyes stayed wet for a long time. The next day, something happened in class that only Joan understood. She was calling roll. Reading names off her attendance sheet the same way she had on her very first day. When she got to Marcus's name, he said, Here. Not loud. Not sarcastic. Just, here. Present. Counted for. And then, from across the room, a crumpled ball of paper sailed through the air. It landed on Joan's desk. She looked up. A kid named David, quiet boy, sat in the middle row, was grinning. Not a mean grin. A nervous one. Joan picked up the paper, unfolded it. Inside, in small careful handwriting, it said, You're the best teacher I ever had. Joan looked at David. David looked at his desk. The class was quiet. Joan smoothed the paper out with her palm and set it on top of her attendance sheet. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She picked up her book and kept teaching. The same attendance sheet. The same classroom. The same woman who'd stood in that doorway on the first day with a crumpled ball of paper at her feet and a room full of strangers who wanted her gone. She was still here. And now so were they.